Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Capital in Asia's In Conversation With series, where we talk to some of the leaders within Asia Pacific's fintech industry. Today, we're happy to have Mathias Faure. Mathias is the CTO of Standard Chartered Nexus, and is going to tell us a little bit more about the focus of Nexus and how that fits into Standard Chartered's strategy in Asia. So, Mathias, welcome. Thanks for taking the time. Just to get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your role at Standard Chartered?
Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I'm Mathias. I'm the CTO for Nexus. So my role is to manage the technology to make sure we add value with technology. So I'm, aligning the technology vision and strategy to the business vision, looking after the architecture, the developer experience, the infrastructure, and obviously the cybersecurity, which is a very important aspect for a banking stack.
That's great. You have a deep history in the financial industry and largely on the tech side. Just to kind of set the stage for some of our listeners, what are some of the things that have surprised you about banks' attitude towards technology in the past few years? What's changed? What's surprised you over your journey?
Yeah, so we have seen, I've been in this industry for over 10 years, and we've seen a big shift from banks to considering IT as a cost versus now considering IT as an opportunity, as a new way to drive new revenue streams. So that's a very important change in the industry. I think where banks are still struggling in this change, it's to adjust the risk approach to technology.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? How has that changed, that risk approach?
Yeah, so I think the banking is all about taking the appropriate risk. I think the art of banking is the art of taking risk, but consider it like the proper risk. And so traditionally, bank were seeing technology as a cost, and we're always saying, okay, we have to make sure we're super secure and define very strong framework around that. But technology has evolved a lot, and now it's about banks or financial services in general have to obviously expose themselves a bit more out there on the internet, on this B2C channel, and then need to adjust their risk posture. Doesn't mean take more risk, but to reconsider their existing framework on the risk approach.
That's really interesting. Can you think of a specific example of that you've seen either from Standard Chartered or another bank in terms of taking more risk with the technology stack?
Sure. So I think in smaller banks are usually quite agile in terms of adapting to risk, probably because they have less smaller. The business is a bit more aligned with technology and can drive it. In big, in larger organization, probably it's a bit harder for banks to align business, security, and risk team all together. They tend to work a bit in isolation.
So Mathias, that's really interesting. Looking more specifically at Standard Chartered and Nexus, how does Nexus represent Standard Chartered's vision for the future of banking?
Yeah, so we see that Standard Chartered is investing massively in digital innovation through its venture arm, SC Venture, and Nexus is part of it. I think the bank understands that the banking industry is being disrupted heavily, especially in its footprint, I think. So it has to adapt quite quickly. So Nexus is a way to target customer at scale, which the bank was probably not really looking at before, and it aims to target customer at scale via partnerships. So this way, we'll be able to have lower acquisition cost of our customer and target this mass segment that was a bit ignored in the past. And we also look at providing a brand new, a full digital customer experience that will also attract, drive some stickiness to our platform.
Interesting. And so with that footprint, specifically talking about the Nexus business, who do you see as the main competitors, both in terms of fintechs and banks? What type of companies are typically there and competitors to what Nexus is focused on?
Yeah, so we see a lot of neobanks, of new digital banks coming. We also see these mega apps, ride-hailing companies, and that are acquiring banking licenses. And then there are other fintechs and BaaS that are emerging. I think the BaaS model is really, gaining in popularity, but it's still defining. There will be a lot of competition coming soon for sure. But Nexus has some big advantages in comparison to the others. Is that first, we are part of Standard Chartered Bank, so we are part of this global footprint with over 30 markets, 30 retail licenses that we can leverage. So we can scale to multiple markets and service global customers with a single engagement for different countries. So that's quite that's a massive advantage. And also we build this stack within a bank. So we didn't build that as a fintech with a lot of freedom, which is good and bad. But the good aspect is that we are built within a bank, so we are kind of a bank grade technology stack. We've been reviewed through all our process by multiple security teams. We have to provide, we can, answer any kind of audit from regulators. So we are a bank grade platform.
That's really interesting. I think that global footprint and the bank grade platform is a real differentiator, certainly for the business. I mean, specifically talking about BaaS, banking as a service, what do you think the risk is for the traditional financial industry? I mean, once we move to this model where there's just embedded finance everywhere, do we still need traditional banks? What becomes the role of traditional banks once BaaS really does take off?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that this BaaS offers a few challenges. So the role of bank is being redefined worldwide, and it started a while ago. So the bank is now a bit less front-facing for the customer, a bit more acting as a utility provider, almost in the back end. But its role still, remains as running a license, which is not something that anyone can actually do. So, and also, so that's the challenge, is how do the bank adapt. Another challenge is how do the regulators and the bank collaborate to define how BaaS can actually work in terms of data sharing, of sharing services.
Mm-hmm.
So we see some big initiatives in the world like open banking, which start to facilitate that, and is being rolled out to many countries. So the change is coming. So there are also some opportunities coming with this change. For the banks, obviously there's a challenge, but for the successful banks that will be able to rethink their business model, then they can target customer at scale. They don't have to worry too much about marketing, customer acquisition cost, and all of that. So they can actually increase their revenue probably. And then I think for the customer will there's a lot of opportunity to actually innovate, drive some very nice digital experience around banking that banks were probably not great at doing, and that partners of banks can probably do better.
Yeah, enabling that change, it seems like, is a big part of the value proposition for BaaS and probably for Nexus, I guess, in that respect as well. From the technology perspective, I mean, when you talk about Nexus and BaaS, I mean, what are the elements of technology that are limiting the adoption of BaaS, or is it not a question of technology? Is that not the limitation? And is it just comfort level from the banks, or is it organizational structure, readiness? What do you think is limiting it? And is technology one of those things?
No, so technology in itself is now mature enough to create some fantastic digital experience. But in the world of financial industry, obviously, the problem around technology or the limiting factors are probably around the risk management framework. So how banks are comfortable with running workloads in the cloud, opening their data to different channels. So the change is coming. So banks are getting more and more confident, and they know they have to adapt or die pretty much. Another related issue, it's obviously, I think we touched already on it. So it's the regulatory framework. So how do we engage the regulator around the initiative like Nexus and get them to approve our applications, to agree to sharing data and services? This is not yet fully defined as kind of a new world. So we are leveraging existing standards like open banking, PSD2. We are relying on that and pushing that in our different target market.
That's interesting. I mean, that point about consumer data, I mean, especially in Australia, has come to the fore. What does the increased regulations around consumer data mean for Nexus in terms of the way that you approach the market and the systems and operations? What are the considerations that you need to take into account as you're looking at these markets that are getting increasingly sophisticated around data regulation?
Yeah, so we obviously have two things. I think prepare ourselves for all these questions. So when we design the platform, we really thought about the problematic of sharing data and services, and we aligned as much as we could to open banking and all the security standards that are around data sharing for financial industry. So there's this financial API standard. Then we use like OpenID Connect to share identities with our partner. So there's this aspect of preparing yourself for it, and then working with the regulators in the different market to to get our model approved. And I think that's also a big advantage of doing a BaaS from a bank, from Standard Chartered, is that we've got this regulatory engagement channels that are already set up. We've got compliance team that work, dedicated compliance team per country that work with regulators. So we can get this change pushed in the different market.
It makes a lot of sense. We spent a bit of time talking about kind of more established markets. So, Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong, Japan, a lot of those markets are very heavily banked. Let's talk for a second about financial inclusion, especially when you look at it in a place here, like where I'm based in Southeast Asia. Once you get outside of Singapore, the banked population drops off dramatically. When you look at BaaS and the potential for financial inclusion, do you see any immediate applications where we can really address that financial inclusion challenge using BaaS?
Yeah, so we are launching Nexus in Indonesia. So we believe that developing markets in Southeast Asia are very receptive for a BaaS solution. So we know that 50% of the Indonesian are underbanked, 68% in Vietnam, 65% in Philippines. And in this country, we see a very high adoption of e-commerce. So Indonesia is the highest e-commerce adoption in the world, with 88% of the population using e-commerce services. So we hold two partnerships in Indonesia. First with a very large e-commerce unicorn called Bukalapak. They provide their services to over 100 million active users, which is incredible, and 13 million sellers, so SME. So for us, it's a very important partnership. And we also announced another partner, which is Sociala, which is a tech beauty e-commerce company, which is present in multiple markets in Southeast Asia. So we believe that through those channels, we'll be able to offer financial services to people who never had access to them before.
That's amazing. I think e-commerce is such a big part of the story here in Asia that, it's a segment that's really enabled financial inclusion from everywhere, from China to Southeast Asia, both in terms of allowing people to access financial products and services and buy goods and services online, but as well for the merchants who are actually selling. And we've interviewed a number of people in China that their lives have been changed by what they're able to do online and the businesses they're able to create for themselves. So it's such an important part of the story. Mathias, this has been great. It's been a really good conversation. I want to close out with one last question. When you look forward to the future, what excites you? What are you looking forward to in the next 3 to 5 years?
So we are already in the pilot phase with our CASA, our transaction and saving accounts. We are launching very soon to the public. So I'm quite excited to be able to offer these financial services to people who never had access. So this financial inclusion is a big piece. We can do that via our full digital onboarding, so people don't have to access a branch. There is also the fact that because our customer acquisition cost is low, we are proposing to these people that we are probably never proposed before to have access to financial services. And we are already going to deliver a pretty advanced financial experience. So we've done a bit of gamification. We have built a huge data platform that is able to hyper contextualize the experience for the users. So it's going to be a pretty interesting experience. Very soon we'll also release some lending products. So buy now, pay later, some installment loans. And we'll be able to do that with a real-time credit decisioning. So it means our users will be on their platform and buying any product they want, and we can propose them on the spot a loan or a revolving line of credit. In the future, so we're also quite interested in the small and medium enterprises. I think there are a lot of very interesting pain points to be addressed in this space. So that's something we're looking forward. And then, I'm pretty excited by the footprint of SCB. So we are going to expand in multiple markets over the next couple of years, and we'll be able to provide services to our partner across different markets, which is amazing.
That's great. The future is very bright, I think, for addressing some of these challenges in the market and for Standard Chartered and Nexus pursuing that. Mathias, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Zenon. Have a good day.